James Carter, a meticulous Heathrow cargo officer, and Sofia Alvarez, an anonymous middleman operating in the shadows, had no idea their paths were about to collide. One early morning, a shipment meant to disappear forever landed in the wrong hands, triggering the UK's biggest airport drug haul, and a chain of events no one could have predicted. Heathrow Airport moved like a giant machine each morning, with thousands of people flowing in and out, unaware of the quiet checks happening behind the scenes. Cargo planes arrived from every corner of the world, delivering everything from fresh flowers to heavy machinery. On this particular morning, the air felt calm, almost predictable, until a small cargo flight appeared on the radar earlier than expected. It was not due for several hours, yet it requested immediate landing clearance. Air traffic control approved it without hesitation, assuming it was related to weather conditions. Nothing seemed unusual at first, but that early arrival was the first sign that something hidden was about to surface. On the ground, a team prepared for unloading. These workers had handled countless shipments, and rarely questioned anything unless it violated airport rules. The paperwork that arrived with the cargo looked perfect, stamped and signed with all the required details. The shipment was marked as machine parts, a common category that rarely raised suspicion. The boxes were large, industrial-looking, and wrapped neatly with reinforced tape. To anyone watching, it was just another routine delivery at one of the busiest airports in the world. Despite the normal appearance, one small detail quietly tugged at the attention of a senior ground officer. The delivery time printed on the manifest did not match the actual landing time. Normally, this would be dismissed as a simple clerical error. But Heathrow maintained extremely strict scheduling. Shipments arriving early or late often passed through additional checks to ensure they were legitimate. The officer made a brief note, planning to double-check later, unaware that this simple observation would soon become part of a much bigger discovery. As the boxes were moved toward the initial scanning area, the atmosphere remained calm. No one suspected the presence of anything illegal. The workers chatted among themselves, pushing cargo trolleys and sorting crates as they always did. The early arrival still felt harmless, almost accidental. Yet hidden behind those metal panels and sealed casings lay the largest quantity of illegal material the airport had ever unknowingly held. The crate labels showed a European cargo company that occasionally used Heathrow as a transit point. Nothing about it seemed unusual. The scanning officers were not expecting trouble, and most of the time, these routine checks revealed nothing more than tools, bolts, and motors. But timing played a silent role in what happened next. The shipment arrived during a window when a specific team was on duty, a team known for being extremely strict about inspecting weight discrepancies and documentation irregularities. However, none of them knew yet that this air cargo had not been meant for inspection at all. Its early arrival placed it directly in the path of protocols designed to catch suspicious goods. A chain of events had already begun, quietly and without warning. The airport remained unaware of the secret packed inside those crates, and the criminal network behind the shipment had no idea their perfectly polished plan had already taken its first unexpected fall. For months, a sophisticated network had been moving illegal substances across Europe using airports as invisible highways. They relied on precision, timing, and inside contacts who could bypass normal security without raising suspicion. Every shipment was meticulously planned. Documents were forged with professional care, boxes were packed to appear completely legitimate, and flights were scheduled to avoid random inspection. The operation functioned like clockwork, with every participant understanding their role and the risks involved. It was a dangerous game, but one they had perfected over years, and they believed nothing could go wrong until the day the Heathrow shipment arrived early. The network system was built around predictability. Pilots were given no knowledge of the contents they carried. They believed they were transporting ordinary cargo. Ground staff at airports were carefully observed and selected based on their access and reliability, ensuring that the shipment would be moved efficiently without any interference. Even minor delays were accounted for in contingency plans, and communication was encrypted to prevent leaks. To the criminals, Heathrow was just another node in a vast, well-oiled machine, one that would never falter unless exposed by human error or pure chance. But that morning, chance played a role. A sudden storm over the southern coast of England forced the cargo plane to request an early landing. The network had never considered weather as a variable that could affect timing, assuming their schedules would remain untouched by nature. The storm, though minor in comparison to the chaos it would eventually trigger, disrupted the entire plan. The shipment landed 3 hours earlier than intended, in a window when random security scans were active. The network's system of timing and precision was undone by something entirely out of their control. Inside the cargo, the packaging remained flawless. Layers of industrial wrapping hid what the officers would later discover were tightly compressed bricks of narcotics. To the criminal network, every precaution had been taken to ensure nothing would be revealed before reaching its destination. Every document, every seal, and every label had been carefully forged to pass routine inspections. Yet the combination of the storm and early landing created an unplanned alignment of circumstances that made the shipment vulnerable to scrutiny. The network's communications began to fail almost immediately after the early arrival. Messages intended for drivers and local distributors went unanswered, delayed by the timing disruption. Panic spread among those waiting to receive the cargo. They could not reach the middlemen, who were themselves disoriented by the sudden deviation from the plan. Weeks of careful preparation unraveled in mere hours. The very system designed to protect them became the cause of their downfall. Even as the shipment moved through the airport, the network could not have predicted the effect of human vigilance, combined with an unpredictable event. Random weight checks, brief inspections, and routine scans, all minor obstacles in ordinary circumstances, suddenly became catastrophic. The shipment was no longer invisible, and the criminals' perfect operation began to collapse, piece by piece, without them even knowing. By the time the officers were preparing to scan the cargo, the network had already lost control. Every precaution, every calculation, and every carefully hidden route was now compromised. A system that had relied on timing, secrecy, and predictability had been undone by a force they could neither manipulate nor anticipate. The storm had shifted everything, and the shipment, meant to pass undetected, was about to make history for a reason no one in the network could have imagined. As the shipment moved through the airport's cargo terminal, a subtle unease began to surface among the security officers. At first glance, the boxes appeared ordinary. Large industrial crates with clear labels and reinforced packaging. They were consistent with thousands of shipments that arrived daily, and nothing about them immediately suggested a problem. However, routine protocol required every shipment to be weighed and logged before it moved further into the system. When the first set of crates was placed on the scales, the numbers did not match the declared weight on the paperwork. The difference was small, almost negligible, but it was enough to trigger a secondary inspection. Heathrow's security system was built to catch even minor anomalies, and this was one of those moments where diligence would make all the difference. The officers handling the shipment began their usual checks, scanning for discrepancies in weight, seals, and documentation. The paperwork was perfect, forged with professional precision, and the crates were sealed in a manner that suggested legitimacy. Yet, the discrepancy in weight could not be ignored. Every airport has protocols for investigating even the smallest inconsistencies. In most cases, the difference is caused by shipping errors or miscalculation, and the shipment is cleared after verification. But, this time, what lay inside the crates was far from ordinary. As the officers moved the crates into the scanning room, the machines hummed with a quiet intensity. The X-ray images revealed shapes that were denser and more uniform than any machinery could produce. Layers upon layers of tightly packed material appeared in patterns that suggested deliberate concealment. It was immediately clear that these were not mechanical parts, and the realization sparked a silent tension in the room. Officers double-checked their readings, convinced they were misinterpreting what the machine displayed. But every scan confirmed the same truth: something illegal, something massive, was hidden inside the cargo. The discovery of the dense material forced the officers to take the next step: One crate was carefully opened under strict supervision. Inside, they found tightly compressed packages wrapped in industrial-grade material, layers upon layers stacked neatly, concealing a substantial quantity of drugs. The scale and sophistication of the concealment suggested a network that had spent months, if not years, perfecting its operations. The shipment was no ordinary smuggling attempt. It was meticulously crafted to avoid detection at every stage. The team quickly realized that this haul was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was not just the size but the ingenuity of the concealment that was alarming. The smugglers had relied on timing, secrecy, and flawless execution, assuming that their plan would never be scrutinized in such detail. But an early landing, a minor discrepancy in weight, and the diligence of the security team had combined to expose it. The officers understood that they were dealing with the UK's largest airport drug haul in history, though at that moment, the full scale of its value and impact was not yet known. The realization brought a mixture of shock and urgency. Standard procedures were immediately escalated, with senior authorities informed and the terminal placed on lockdown. Every individual who had handled the shipment was noted for questioning, and the entire area was secured to prevent contamination or interference. The discovery of the first crate was only the beginning. It marked the start of a chain of events that would unravel an elaborate criminal network, a network that had assumed its operations were invisible and untouchable. In that moment, the airport was unaware that a single anomaly, the mismatch in weight, had triggered the exposure of one of the most sophisticated drug smuggling operations the UK had ever seen. The discrepancy, seemingly insignificant, had set the stage for history to be made, and the officers could only anticipate the full magnitude of what lay ahead. The first crate had barely been opened when the scale of the discovery became impossible to ignore. Inside, the tightly wrapped packages revealed layers upon layers of carefully concealed narcotics, each brick pressed and sealed to avoid detection. The officers handling the cargo were trained for surprises, but even they paused, realizing they had stumbled upon something unprecedented. The sheer quantity of material suggested millions of pounds worth of illegal drugs, far exceeding anything the airport had ever encountered. What had begun as a routine inspection had turned into a historic seizure, and the reality of the situation was slowly sinking in. The packaging itself told a story of extreme sophistication. Industrial-grade wraps, multiple layers of protective material, and precise arrangements of the bricks indicated months of planning. Whoever had prepared this shipment understood airport security down to the smallest detail. Every precaution had been taken to ensure that the cargo would appear ordinary to anyone who glanced at it, from customs officers to ground staff. The only reason it had been discovered at all was a combination of chance and the early landing that placed it directly in the path of routine inspection. A perfectly executed criminal operation had been undone by circumstances entirely outside their control. As more crates were opened, the magnitude of the haul became undeniable. Every crate contained carefully compressed packages, each hidden beneath layers of material designed to mask weight and density. The officers documented everything meticulously, photographing and logging each layer as it was revealed. The realization that they were handling the largest airport drug seizure in UK history brought a quiet sense of gravity to the room. Every officer understood that this was more than a routine bust. It was a significant strike against a major criminal network, one that had assumed it was untouchable. The news quickly spread through the airport. Security teams, supervisors, and senior officials were informed, and a lockdown was imposed on the terminal. The usual calm of the cargo area was replaced with a heightened sense of urgency. Officers worked in coordinated silence, moving the crates carefully to prevent tampering or contamination. The presence of so much contraband in a space designed for efficiency and speed highlighted just how vulnerable even the most heavily monitored airports could be to highly sophisticated smuggling operations. Behind the scenes, the criminal network that had orchestrated the shipment was already beginning to panic. Their communication lines were disrupted, drivers and middlemen were confused by missed signals, and the meticulously planned timeline was unraveling. The shipment had been intended to pass completely unnoticed, but the early landing, combined with diligent security procedures, had exposed everything. Every layer of the operation, every contact, every route was now vulnerable to law enforcement scrutiny. Despite the officers' careful work, the emotional impact of the discovery was palpable. It was a moment of awe and tension. They had uncovered a scale of smuggling that had likely never been imagined. Each crate revealed more of the story, layers of concealment, vast quantities of narcotics, and an indication of the organizational complexity behind the operation. The room was filled with a quiet understanding. This seizure was only the beginning. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the shipment's exposure would have ripple effects far beyond Heathrow. The criminals had lost control of their operation in a single, unplanned moment. A network that had relied on secrecy, timing, and precision had been undone by a combination of human diligence and unforeseen circumstances. The shipment, meant to remain hidden, had instead become a defining moment in the history of UK law enforcement, and its discovery would set off a chain reaction no one could have anticipated. The moment the shipment was discovered, the airport transformed into a controlled zone of investigation. Officers quickly sealed off the cargo terminal, preventing anyone from entering or leaving without proper authorization. Each crate, each layer was carefully catalogued, and every worker who had handled the cargo was identified for questioning. What had started as a routine morning now escalated into a full-scale operation involving multiple departments and agencies. The lockdown was necessary not only to secure the contraband but also to prevent panic, both among airport staff and the criminal network that had orchestrated the shipment. As word of the seizure spread, the criminal network began to realize that their plan had gone catastrophically wrong. The drivers waiting outside for pickup received no signal. Communication lines to middlemen went silent. The shipment, meant to be swiftly transferred out of the airport, was now trapped in a system they could not control. Panic set in. Members of the network began abandoning pre-arranged safe houses. Money transfers froze, and contacts that were once reliable became unreachable. Every calculated move that had been executed flawlessly for months now seemed chaotic. The meticulous planning had been undone by a single chain of events that they could neither reverse nor predict. The authorities, on the other hand, capitalized on the network's confusion. Every piece of documentation, every crate and every individual connected to the shipment became a potential. Investigators quickly began tracing routes, examining phone records, and cross-referencing the cargo paperwork with known shell companies. It became clear that the network had relied on the shipment arriving at the exact scheduled time. Any deviation, they assumed, would go unnoticed. But the early landing had created a timing window that allowed the officers to act before the network could intervene. The domino effect was already in motion. Inside the cargo terminal, the atmosphere was tense. Officers worked around the clock, documenting every detail. The meticulous inspection revealed that each crate contained identical layers of tightly packed narcotics. The sheer scale of the seizure was staggering, and it became evident that the network had underestimated the potential for a random inspection to uncover the operation. What was designed to move silently across borders now lay exposed under the unforgiving scrutiny of law enforcement. Beyond the airport, the criminal organization scrambled to salvage what remained of their operation. Safe houses were abandoned without warning, and uncollected payments and shipments created a ripple of confusion across Europe. Those who had assumed their roles were secure suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Contacts who were supposed to receive the shipment could not locate it, and the network's middlemen vanished, leaving drivers and accomplices in a state of panic. The collapse was immediate, and no contingency plan could contain it. The domino effect did not stop at logistics. The seizure prompted wider investigations into associated companies, warehouses, and financial channels. Authorities realized that a single early landing had triggered a cascade of failures that would expose the broader network. Every precaution the criminals had taken, encrypted messages, forged documents, and careful timing, was rendered useless. The operation that had seemed untouchable was now unraveling piece by piece. By the end of the day, it was clear that the seizure had struck a major blow to organized crime in the UK. What began as a single shipment had led to a lockdown, a massive investigation, and the collapse of an entire network's carefully constructed system. The criminals had lost control entirely, and every subsequent move was reactive, rather than strategic. A shipment meant to move unnoticed had instead become the catalyst for chaos, demonstrating that even the most meticulously planned criminal operations could crumble under unforeseen circumstances and human diligence. As investigators delved deeper into the seized shipment, they quickly realized that the operation was far more sophisticated than a typical smuggling attempt. The cargo company listed on the paperwork, the name used to arrange customs clearance and transport, did not exist. Every record of its existence, its registration, bank accounts, and contact information was fabricated. It was a shell company, created with precision to act as a buffer between the criminal network and the authorities. Whoever had orchestrated this middle layer had designed it to be completely invisible, a phantom that would leave no trace once the cargo was safely delivered. The search for the middleman behind the operation became an immediate priority. Investigators discovered that communications associated with the shipment were heavily encrypted and routed through multiple digital channels. Emails bounced through anonymous servers, phone calls used burner devices, and payment records were disguised as legitimate transactions. Every digital footprint led to dead ends, with no personal identity, no location, and no history to follow. The middleman existed only as a set of instructions and protocols, controlling operations without ever physically touching the cargo. This invisible control allowed the network to function with terrifying efficiency. Pilots, drivers, and local distributors all followed precise instructions without understanding the full scope of what they were transporting. Each person involved was a cog in a machine, and the middleman remained the unseen engineer, orchestrating timing, routes, and coordination with near-perfect accuracy. It was this unseen layer of command that made the seizure at Heathrow so extraordinary. The officers were uncovering an operation that was intended to be untouchable because it relied on human invisibility and digital secrecy. However, the network's reliance on this invisible middleman became its greatest vulnerability. The early landing of the cargo meant that the carefully timed plan collapsed before it could reach its next stage. Drivers and local contacts, expecting pickup at the scheduled hour, waited in vain. The middleman, who had never revealed a physical presence, could not intervene directly. The shipment was now in the hands of law enforcement, and every calculated move of the network was rendered ineffective. A system designed for control had no contingency for human factors, randomness, or unforeseen delays. As the investigation expanded, authorities realized that the middleman's design was both ingenious and ruthless. The entire operation was compartmentalized. No single participant knew the full plan. Each segment of the network operated under instructions, blind to the identities and roles of others. This meant that even if one part of the network was compromised, the middleman remained protected. But the discovery at Heathrow had exposed a flaw. Timing errors could break the chain entirely, leaving even the invisible orchestrator powerless. The sophistication of the middleman left investigators in awe. For months the network had moved significant quantities of narcotics without detection, relying entirely on secrecy and precision. The shell company, encrypted communications, and digital ghost persona were all layers of protection designed to make the operation untouchable. Yet, in the end, a combination of chance, diligent inspection, and unforeseen circumstances had unmasked the entire system. The realization that an entire criminal network could be commanded by someone who may never physically exist in the world was both chilling and fascinating. The middleman's role had been central to the network's operation, yet now it had become irrelevant. The shipment's exposure at Heathrow had triggered a collapse that could not be reversed. For law enforcement, it was an unprecedented case, a glimpse into a world where crime operated entirely through digital shadows and invisible hands, yet was still vulnerable to the unpredictable nature of reality. The collapse of the operation at Heathrow had begun long before anyone could fully grasp it, and investigators soon discovered that the failure was not caused by human error or betrayal within the network. Instead, it had been a mistake that no one could have predicted, an automated software update. The criminal organization relied on a sophisticated logistics program to schedule flights, coordinate pickups, and track shipments across borders. The system was designed to maintain perfect timing, ensuring that every part of the operation ran smoothly. But when the storm forced a flight to request an early landing, the software automatically recalculated schedules, updating the plane's arrival time without alerting anyone in the network. This tiny, almost invisible change proved catastrophic. The middleman, who had orchestrated the shipment with near-perfect precision, never noticed the altered schedule. Drivers waiting outside, safe houses prepared for the original arrival time, and local contacts expecting instructions were all thrown off of a difference of just a few hours. The cargo, which had been meant to pass unnoticed during a planned quiet window, suddenly arrived when the airport's random inspections were active. A system designed for flawless execution had inadvertently exposed the shipment to scrutiny. Investigators later pieced together the sequence of events and realized how fragile the network's operations were. Every precaution the criminals had taken, sealed crates, forged documentation, encrypted communications, and a digital ghost in the middleman depended entirely on timing. The software, designed to increase efficiency and reduce risk, had unintentionally created the exact conditions for the shipment to be caught. It was an error that was invisible to the criminals until it was too late, a failure caused by technology rather than betrayal. The domino effect of this timing error became immediately apparent. The shipment landed 3 hours earlier than expected, placing it directly under the attention of the inspection team. Security officers noticed the weight discrepancy, scanned the cargo, and uncovered layers of illegal substances. At the same time, the network's drivers, waiting for the scheduled pickup, could not find the shipment. Middlemen attempting to coordinate pickups were left without communication, their carefully constructed schedules rendered useless. A perfectly orchestrated criminal plan collapsed because of an automated system, a silent, invisible mistake that no one could control. The investigation revealed that the network had assumed its timing system was infallible. Every route, every document, every contact was contingent upon the software's precise calculations. There was no human check in place for unexpected deviations caused by external factors, such as weather or technical updates. The early landing had triggered a chain reaction that exposed not just the shipment, but the vulnerability of the entire operation. What was meant to be a flawless smuggling attempt became a historic bust because of one tiny, overlooked variable. Even the middleman, who had remained invisible and untouchable for months, could not intervene. The digital ghost had no way to physically alter the shipment or communicate with personnel in time to prevent exposure. The criminals' reliance on technology had become their undoing. A system designed to increase efficiency had inadvertently dismantled their entire plan, leaving law enforcement with the largest seizure in UK airport history. In the end, it was not betrayal, greed, or human error that caused the downfall. It was a subtle, almost invisible flaw in an automated system. A single software update, a minor recalculation triggered by a storm, and a shipment that arrived at the wrong time turned an untouchable criminal network into a case study in failure. The chain of events was a stark reminder that no matter how meticulous or sophisticated a plan may be, the smallest variables can have consequences no one could anticipate. The aftermath of the Heathrow seizure sent shockwaves through the world of law enforcement and organized crime alike. The cargo terminal, once a place of routine efficiency, had transformed into a scene of unprecedented activity. Officers continued to document, catalog, and secure every crate, carefully preserving the evidence for further investigation. The size and sophistication of the haul were unlike anything the airport had ever experienced, and the authorities realized that what they were dealing with extended far beyond a single shipment. It was a glimpse into the inner workings of a criminal network operating at the highest levels of precision, planning, and secrecy. News of the seizure quickly spread beyond the airport walls. Media outlets reported on the historic scale of the bust, and the public learned about a shipment that had been hidden in plain sight. Behind the headlines, investigators worked tirelessly to trace the origins of the cargo, identify the network, and understand the infrastructure that had allowed such an audacious smuggling attempt to function. Every lead seemed to point to dead ends: shell companies, digital ghosts, abandoned warehouses, and encrypted communications. The network had been designed to leave no trace, yet one small mistake, a storm, an early landing, a software update, had undone years of meticulous planning. The criminal organization, once confident in its invisibility, found itself in complete disarray. Members abandoned safe houses, money transfers were halted, and communication lines went dark. Drivers, middlemen, and local distributors were left confused and vulnerable, realizing that the shipment was no longer under anyone's control. Even the invisible middleman, the architect of the operation, who had coordinated every movement without ever physically touching the cargo, was powerless. The timing error and the exposure at Heathrow had shattered the network's sense of invulnerability. As the investigation unfolded, authorities discovered that the network's reliance on precision and secrecy had been both its greatest strength and its fatal flaw. The criminals had trusted in technology, encrypted communications, and flawless timing, assuming these measures would protect them indefinitely. Yet, when reality intervened, a storm, a recalculated schedule, and a diligent security team, the entire system collapsed. The shipment, meant to pass unnoticed, had become the catalyst for an unprecedented unraveling of an organized criminal network. Even months after the seizure, many questions remained unanswered. The middleman's identity was never discovered, leaving authorities and the public to speculate about how such a sophisticated operation had been conceived and executed. Some elements of the network likely continued to operate elsewhere, adapting and evolving in the shadows, but the collapse at Heathrow served as a warning. Even the most meticulously planned criminal enterprises are vulnerable to chance, diligence, and unforeseen circumstances. The seizure also had a lasting impact on airport security protocols across the UK. Procedures were reviewed and strengthened to prevent similar shipments from slipping through undetected. Random checks, weight verifications, and timing audits became more stringent, designed to catch even the smallest anomalies. Law enforcement had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of vigilance, timing, and human oversight in combating highly organized crime. Ultimately, the Heathrow seizure became a defining moment in UK criminal history. A combination of luck, human diligence, and a minor software miscalculation exposed the largest airport drug haul the country had ever seen. The criminal network's collapse was a testament to how fragile even the most sophisticated operations can be when faced with unforeseen events. The story of the shipment, its unexpected discovery, and the chaos that followed remains a chilling reminder that sometimes a plan meant to be perfect can unravel completely in the blink of an eye.